Well, hello folks, thank you for joining us here on Common Ground. My name is Jeff Morris as always, and I serve as your host and chair of this program, and now we are almost done with the legislative session. We're pleased to have with us special guest John Cooper. Good to see you.
Good to be with you, Jeff.
Yes, sir. Well, so how have things been?
It's been a good week.
Good.
I think this has been one of my best weeks that I've had probably since I've been down there. A lot of movement in the bills, particularly my own. Been helping House members flush theirs out on the Senate side, so everything's moving along, and I think it's been a real good week. Some of mine has either been signed now or completed the full round of the assemblies, and got one or two final touches to put on some very important ones this week, and I think that's going to be done also, so I'm very happy with where we are right now.
Well, good deal. Well, like I mentioned, it's been a couple of weeks since we've done this, and of course you are our only resident senator here in Craighead County, and so I always like to get a Senate perspective and House perspective.
Well, so. It's good. Things is moving fast.
I can tell.
A lot of late hours this last 2 weeks. I say last 3 weeks has been very intensive. A lot of late hours and long days with sometimes not having even lunch, and but that's okay. But we've moved a lot of good legislation, and that's the most important thing.
Well, good. Well, let's start with this. Going backwards a little bit, we'll go back and talk about some of the things that have happened in the last couple of weeks here.
Sure.
First, we have this robocalling bill that has come about, and I know had great support from Leslie Rutledge, our Attorney General.
Right, it did, and that's a very good bill. I think this is probably one that touches every citizen out there, especially if you have a cell phone. You know, the number of calls that you get is just spam calls or maybe even fraudulent calls, but we're trying to deal with that as best we can in the state. There's some federal issues that come into play on that also, but we're doing what we can in the state to help the citizens receive less of these bad calls.
Let's talk about SB 99. That's our Medicaid bill. I know that you can explain that better than I can.
Okay, the SB 99 is the Medicaid Medical Services bill. That's a bill that has a different number every session, but it's pretty much the identical bill that occurs in the regular session. Probably one of the most important bills that we do. In fact, it's an essential bill that we get that passed. That bill is $8.2 billion worth, and that's with a B. That's not an M. That's $8.2 billion worth of funding that, for the most part, comes from the federal government through grants. And that has to do with funding for nursing homes, hospice, infant care in infirmaries. It has to do with physician reimbursements, a lot of critical care issues involved in that, and if that was not funded, that would be an absolute disaster. It would be traumatic. In fact, that's an essential piece of legislation that we get that done. What makes that piece of legislation controversial is it also contains the Arkansas Works project, or the program, and so that's only a small part of this big piece of legislation, but people sometimes vote against that in hopes of gaining leverage to do the policy on the other. So that's unfortunate, but that's the way that works.
Yeah. No. So shortly after that bill passed, we see on the news back. I guess that it was before this. There was a work requirement put in place for folks that obtain services through Medicaid.
I'm a strong supporter of the work requirement. Always have been. I don't know where that's going, but I think that ultimately the work requirement will be upheld, and I don't see that going away in some form or fashion. I think that will remain. Of course, we have to go through the process of defending that, and but I think eventually it will work its way through the courts, and I think it'll be sustained.
Well, good, because of course, as of now, I believe that it was Kentucky was the other state
Right.
that was
It's Kentucky and
looped in with
Arkansas in
us.
that legislation
Right.
that the judge dealt with there.
Right, and of course he said that it can't stand. But I'm like you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how we can have those services and not have some type of work requirement. It just makes sense.
We have work requirements in other forms of legislation that does other things.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see how this is necessarily any different. So I think it'll be sustained
Good.
down the line.
Good. Well, we saw, was it yesterday, day before, we saw this anti-sanctuary city bill come into play.
Right, we voted that. Mhm.
And let me tell you this, this is a extremely critical
Right,
piece
right.
of legislation as far as
Yeah.
making sure that we uphold the law here.
Right.
Now, granted, I know that not everybody was a fan of some of the components of the bill. Maybe the language wasn't perfect, and
Right.
frankly, I don't think there's ever been a perfect piece of legislation, but ultimately you voted for it.
Right, I did.
Okay.
I think you said it well there, that every piece of legislation has some kind of unintended consequences. Some of them are great, some of them are smaller. Some of them you can see beforehand when you see the legislation, and some of them surprises you. And I've had a couple of surprises on my own bills this year that I've had to go back and fix. And one of them I had to run a new bill, or it was better that I run a new bill because of the unforeseen consequence of that, which we picked up on before the legislative session ended. And it was, guess it was a big deal, but it was something we need to get done.
Right.
And so you have to be careful running legislation, because they all have an effect that you might not have seen somewhere.
Right. Well, let's talk about a hot button topic here, and that's the internet sales tax.
Okay.
First, of course, that bill passed the Senate, and of course, going to our Craighead County legislators, you were our only senator here, and so you were in support of that
Right.
bill.
I did.
And then over on
Still
the House
am.
side,
Mm-hmm.
it passed 68 to 20, voting yes. Well, Craighead County elected officials were Jack Ladyman, and then voting no were Brandon Smith, Tosh, and Dan Sullivan there.
Yeah.
So tell us this: what all does this include, and what are your thoughts on the bill?
Well, I think that the internet sales tax, there's more people doing sales tax now and buying the products online. It's just a fairness issue, to where the merchants in our area won't have to be working at a disadvantage. They contribute to community charities and things like that, and when you get a company in a foreign state and long away distance from Jonesboro, they're not very interested in charities that is taking place in Jonesboro, Arkansas. So they're not going to be supportive with their contributions back, like our merchants here that do business among our community does. And in the future, there's going to be probably more internet sales takes place, and that's just fairness in how we fund our highways and community services here in our community. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind about that. This is not a new tax. The requirement to do this goes back to 1949, I believe it is.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a requirement to pay that tax, but in the interim period, it boils down to whether you can enforce that or not. And the Supreme Court issued a statement decision years ago, saying that the states could not enforce that on an out-of-state company. So now there's been a new Supreme Court ruling that the states can enforce that within the individual states, and that's why we have this new legislation passed to reiterate that this is the law in Arkansas.
Okay. Well, going on, so we're here at the end of session, so let's take
Probably
a look.
have this week the part of a week. I don't know if we'll be there every day this week, but we're going to finish this week, looks like.
Well, cool. So gun bills. Every year the NRA has some kind of gun bill that they that they push. So it looks like this bill is going to be SB 484, and so this is the bill that we discussed a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
What we called it a stand your ground bill.
That's what they call it. Yeah.
And so a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how you were the final vote in that in Senate Judiciary. So now we've seen on numerous media outlets that SB 484 is going to make a comeback on Monday. So what are your thoughts on how that process is going to go? We know that Monday is the first day that you guys are going to be able to extract bills from committee. So I assume that's the process that this is going to have to take.
Yes. This bill has been sitting in Judiciary Committee for 3 or 4 weeks now at least. It was first run. It's actually been just run, I guess, one time, and it did not pass. And I was the key vote that the no vote on that. And from the first time that I read this bill, it was clear to me that this bill is not a good bill, and it had big problems. And I'm just not willing to pass something that's going to be dangerous for our people. And but this is a piece of legislation that the NRA wants. And but keep in mind, the NRA is going. They're a special interest group, and they're going to run a piece of legislation every time because that's where they generate their contributions from, so they've got to keep some kind of issue in front of people so that the contributions will continue to come in. Well, that does not necessarily mean that the legislation that they're pushing is necessarily what we want to do. And this is not a good bill. Never has been, and never have supported it, and I'm committed to voting it down with every vote that I have. And there was a vote this week to change the date in which people could make motions to extract things from committees, and it did not pass. That effort was defeated. But now, coming Monday, I guess they will try it again, and we'll see where that goes. But this bill has been amended a little bit. But keep in mind that all law enforcement opposes this bill. Prosecutors oppose it. The Sheriff's Association opposes it. I don't know of a single law enforcement group that supports this bill. And I have literally received thousands of contacts, both here in Craighead County and across this state, pleading with me to defeat this bill. And that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the legislation that you've had a part of this session. Of course, now we have your Attorney General's bill. It went through the House yesterday, so tell us about that.
Oh, this Attorney General's bill, I think, is something I get really excited about. This is probably, I think, in my opinion, the best bill that I've ever sponsored. And it may be one of the best bills in the entire session this time, because this has such an impact for reforming the occupational licensing piece of red tape reduction. This is one of the key bills that was recommended that came out of that red tape effort. And there was a report that was contained in this, the broad outline of this, that went to the governor. And this is the legislation behind that report. And I've worked with the Attorney General's office for months on this. This is basically a bill that the Attorney General's office has primarily written themselves and brought to me in outline form. And I sponsored it for them and worked with them on a couple of modifications that we made on it. And it has been very well received in committee and in the Senate and over in the House committee, and it was voted out of the House Assembly I guess it was yesterday, probably yesterday or day before yesterday, yeah. And now it's back in the Senate one more time for concurrence on an amendment that was put on it. And this bill just gives a structure for reform of the licensing process for people that have some kind of a criminal record, to give them a path forward to have a productive occupation. They have to keep themselves clean, and there's some pretty strict protocols in there concerning that they can't backslide into their previous record. If they do, they're out off the table for us being able to use this legislation. But I think this is going to have a dramatic effect on the way that we look at things like that.
Okay. So what are some of the other bills that you've sponsored or co-sponsored this session that have been big?
Well, I've worked with the Municipal League on a couple of things that were important to them concerning some vacant municipal offices. I worked with them on use of a debit card to pay for the utility bills. I guess that may surprise some people that there wasn't really any authorization allowing municipalities to do that. Some of them may have been doing it anyway, but we made it clear in statute that they could do that. And then there was some other things concerning batteries, theft of batteries from utilities. That's now considered communications property, and the reason that bill was necessary is that there were people that were breaking into remote cabinets, utilities, and stealing the batteries and then selling them for salvage, and that's very expensive because those batteries are critical to the operation of those cabinets, some of which carry some very important communications, and any communications is important, so we can't allow that to happen. We did a bill, this was a co-sponsored bill that it was a House bill that I worked with a sponsor over there on to prohibit abortions after 18 weeks. We also did another Right to Life bill concerning Down syndrome, where that alone could not be used as a reason to perform an abortion. So those are, I think, very important things that we did. We also did another red tape bill concerning the Board of License Examiners, and worked with them on making it easier and the process easier and move a little bit more efficient. And we also reformed the regulations concerning the Board of Contractors, making it easier for them to operate. I think we covered that in a previous section of this. And then, of course, we did work with them. I was a co-sponsor of the highway maintenance bill.
Good deal.
So overall, I think
it's been a busy session. You've been busy, huh?
I think I was involved in sponsoring 35 bills as a primary sponsor, and 25 more that I'm on the record for as co-sponsor, and then I don't know how many more that I just did not actually document my participation in, that I worked with the House sponsors on getting theirs done over on our side.
Wow.
So it's been busy, but it's been fun.
Well, good. Well, and I know tomorrow you go back to Little Rock. This is the last week that we have here in session, we hope.
I think it will be.
Okay, and so Thursday or Friday, that should be it, and we'll call it a wrap.
Yeah, it'll be 2 years before we do this again. Next year we will do a fiscal session where we look at bills to pay the state's expenses and catch up on that. So
real quick,
that'll be pretty brief.
Oh yeah, real quick. I've had a few people that have asked me, okay, so what is a fiscal session? Well, you kind of hit on it there.
Right.
Of course, you'll go back next January for that, but
we have a rule in the Senate that you cannot run regular bills in a fiscal session. And the reason for that is we don't want the fiscal session to turn into a regular session, which will pull it out for 2 months or so. Mm-hmm. So if anybody has a regular bill that they want to run, it requires, I believe it's a 3/4 vote to even introduce it. So we don't see many of them.
Yeah.
We will also have a probably at some point, possibly a special session if anything important arises, which we need to go back in for 3 to 5 days to deal with a special issue that might come along of great importance to the state. We can do that in a special call by the governor.
Okay. Anything else that you'd like to share with us?
I just want to say to the viewers that it's a pleasure serving you, and everybody have a good spring, and maybe the winter is over now. I guess everybody's going to get out and start doing some gardening and yard work, and I know I'm looking forward to that because my yard really feels abused right now. So.
Well, good deal. Well, Senator, I appreciate you coming, and throughout this session, you've always been great to come and share with us what's been going on, and I know that several viewers have written us on Facebook or have given me a phone call saying just how much that they appreciate hearing from you guys, and so we thank you for that.
Glad to do it.
Absolutely. Well,
I'm looking forward to getting back in the community more. We're gone almost every day during the week now, and so I'm looking forward to getting back into some activities in the community and reconnecting with some of the people that I haven't seen in a while.
Good deal. Well, then we'll see you out there. Right. Well, Senator, I appreciate it. It's good to see you. And folks, we hope to see you soon. Matter of fact, I'll take this time to invite everybody to our next regular meeting. That is going to be on April 23rd, I believe it is. You've probably seen a promo or two on Facebook for that. We'll have a special guest, Jane Morgan, with us as our speaker, and we'll meet at Lazari's at 5:30 if you plan to eat. If not, just meet us there at 6:30, and we're going to have a good time. So we hope to see you there, and let us know if you need anything in the meantime. Thank you much, Senator.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.